Lagos is home to over 20 million plus persons. With that number comes its unattended issues. One of the issues is youth population. As we speak, there are concerns about what we call aggressive begging. You've seen some of those videos of celebrities being literally harassed, some of them getting severe panic. Whether you drive a luxury car, you drive a regular car, you see all of these things happen. How can we make these young people productive? Well, we've also tried to reach out to the Honorable Commissioner for Youths in Lagos State. We haven't gotten a positive response as to his appearance yet. Maybe he's going to respond soon to the producer. But as soon as he's ready, we were ready to talk to him. But let's talk to a member of the ADC in the state who is running for the House of Assembly. Ayodeola Adio joins us virtually. Mr. Adio, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
I'm sure you've seen, thanks for your patience as well for waiting on us to come to you. Let's see how much you can binge on this. Talk to us about what we've seen as some kind of an upscale escalation of this. In fact, there are two things that bother a lot of people. One is the aggressive begging that we see with these young persons on the island, on the mainland, and then the issue of, I don't know what it's called now, you know, where this, I think Ola of Lagos, which we've interviewed a long time ago, he made that popular, at least in recent time, when he's going to be taking videos of luxury cars and talking about who owns them perhaps, or what the name of those cars are. And sometimes these things border on personal privacy and national security or personal security. But what do you make of this trend now? Aggressive begging in Lagos and this car spotting. I'm trying to remember the name. I don't know. I can't remember the name now. That can border on privacy.
Okay, just to really touch on the car spotting thing, I can argue that a lot of the people who you see their cars being profiled also enjoy the ride and sometimes even pay some of these boys to make all the noise that they want to make for them. But however, let's go to the meat of the conversation, which is the amount of young people you see on the streets on drugs, in several neighborhoods across Lagos State, even high-profile areas in Lagos State. Is a symptom of an economy over the last 2 decades, perhaps, that has widened unemployment and has deepened poverty in our country. Young people leave school and are unable to get jobs. Young people who leave secondary schools are unable to get into university do also not have the kinds of skills to earn an income in between that gap, to earn a living. And perhaps to wait until they have enough resources saved to get into university. So you put it all together, we have created an economy, what I like to call a casino economy that favors a tiny elite at the top and leaves the majority at the bottom in absolute poverty. You would recall that Professor Doyin Salami released a report recently that made the point that less than 2% of Nigerians control 44% of the wealth in this country. That's a staggering inequality that we're experiencing in this country, and an economy that is not creating enough jobs and opportunities for young people at the bottom. And until that fundamentally changes, you're likely to see many of our streets overridden by young people begging, many of which we get a lot more aggressive over the years. And you're likely to see a lot of street begging across the country. So something has to give. And for me, it's about policy from the federal and state governments that align and create an enabling environment that lifts millions of young people out of poverty and plug them into the productive economy. And except that happens, we're just going to be on the edge of chaos.
So in positing with Lagos, for instance, because there are a couple of questions I wanted to ask the Commissioner for Youth. Where do they really, where should they really start from with this issue? Yes, I hear you when you said some of these people enjoy this, filming that they film, but I've also seen some of them literally in panic mode. Literally, when these guys jump on the vehicles and literally wants to break through the vehicle, I don't know, for whatever. In terms of policy directives, what should be done immediately? Because it doesn't look good at all. In fact, somebody did a mini docu I saw, I think on social media, which doesn't tell well of a mega city like Lagos. Adio?
So what you're seeing in Lagos is can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
So what you're seeing in Lagos is a convergence. Yes. So what you're seeing in Lagos is a convergence of three factors. One is a poor housing policy. And perhaps let me just sum it up into a cost of living crisis that you're experiencing in Lagos. One, driven by the high cost of accommodation, which means that a lot of young people cannot afford to pay rents. And so you have a lot of young people who now live on the streets in Lagos, or they live in crowded spaces where you have 8 to 9, 10 young men clamping into a room to leave, and at night all of these young men are outside in quote hustling. You also have a high cost transportation problem in Lagos, where people who actually even live in low income areas, and you're talking about the extremes end of Ikorodu, Badagry, Ibejuleki, the cost of moving those people to this mega city center where the economic activities like Lekki, Victoria Island, Ikeja, GRA, and perhaps a bit of Surulere is stupendously expensive, that such individuals cannot go to and fro every day back and for work. So what happens is that the combination of high cost of rentals and high cost of transportation forces young people to concentrate in areas of economic centers like Lekki, Victoria Island, and Ikeja. And that's why you see all of these boys constantly on the streets, particularly in these corridors, because that's where economic activities are. That's where they can harass people to beg for money and get 5 to 10 naira off their pockets. And that's exactly the same places where they can earn a decent living even if they want to. So you have a situation where the cost of living crisis is forcing a lot of young people on the streets of Lagos, some of whom have now been forced to commit several unscrupulous and unbecoming acts, like being aggressive on the roads, and things like that. So we have to tackle it. And you asked me what the first thing that people need to do. I think is to tackle the cost of living crisis in Lagos. Once we're able to do that, and we tackle that simultaneously with the housing problem in Lagos, we will be able to reduce this amount of nuisance that you see on the streets of Lagos.
And I couldn't have agreed less with you. I remember doing a documentary earlier this year where I went to the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Highway, where there are shanties, and I interacted with those who live in these shanties. And some of the points you've mentioned, resonates, because some of them explain that indeed some of them live in very extremes of Lagos, and because of work, there are families who are in those shanties who have to stay there from Mondays to Fridays, and then by maybe weekend they go back to their homes. But there are those also who said, you know what, we're living somewhere and our houses were demolished and all of that. It's a big concern. And I tell you what, I saw some really very young, talented Nigerians in that place, in the shanties. In fact, there's a particular place where they call Marawa. I went to the heart, they call it the heart of the ghetto. you know how this job takes us to almost every corner. So, when I spoke to those guys, some of them sounded educated. I mean, they could speak really well. And I wish that I had my way. If I had my way, I would have pulled them away from there and fix them, make them have better lives. But if you're going to talk to any of those guys who are there, they're young Nigerians, really very talented. I wonder what exactly you would say to them. The second part of my question would be, in 1991, according to the World Population Review, Lagos had a population of barely 5 million plus. As it stands right now, we are around over 20 million plus. We're not exactly sure. According to reports, about 6,000 people and more enter Lagos on a daily basis, and more than half the number stay back in Lagos. What needs to happen in other states for people to stay in their states and be comfortable there? What needs to happen? Because as much as we want to blame perhaps even the Lagos state government and all of that, but we forget that Nigerians are leaving different parts of the country to come to Lagos, where it is believed that once you get to Lagos, you must make them.
Well, you're right. To the first leg of your question, I'm not sure what I'm going to tell the young man living in the slum in Marwa or the various slums in Victoria Island, and perhaps many of them that proliferate Etiosa local government. Because, like you rightfully said, there is an apartheid housing policy in Lagos where houses of the poor and low-income earners are being demolished and they are moved outside the skirts of the city center, towards, far locations outside Ibejuleki, Eleko, Badagry, removing them from the economic centers where they earn a living from. Like I mentioned the other time, they can't afford to come to work from Eleko every day because the cost of transportation will mean that they are working for absolutely nothing. So until we fix this apartheid housing policy that makes housing the exclusive purview of those who have wealth and are upwardly mobile, we're going to fundamentally deal with people living in slums and have these crowded spaces along in quote elite corridors in Lagos. The second part of your question, really and truly, is that it's a national crisis. Because you just don't have the surge of population in Lagos, even though you have a traffic flow into Lagos for economic opportunities. What needs to happen is that there has to be a consensus by federal and state governments to drive prosperity for young people and to lift millions of people out of poverty. Let me tell you why this is even frightening. By 1990, world poverty had been decisively reduced across many countries in the world, except for 7 countries. You can add Congo is part of them, and Nigeria was one of those 7 countries. That rather than reducing global poverty over the last 3-4 decades, we have added close to 37 million more people that are extremely poor in our economy. The reason is because, like I argue, we run a casino economy that has been actually energized by the recent administration, where the elites with wealth and capital seem to multiply their own wealth, and those at the lower end of the ladder continue to grapple for straws. And so we have created a lot more poor people in this country because factories aren't working, processing facilities aren't working, and these are large-scale businesses that can lift people out of poverty. The cost of capital is high. If you go to a microfinance to access capital, you will be paying upward of 60% to pay back a loan. That is unsustainable to give life to small and micro businesses a start. So something has to shift fundamentally from the cost of micro capital to the larger economy that invests in processing and high manufacturing concerns that are tied to our agricultural value chain that creates meaningful job opportunities for millions of young people across the country. Now, except that happens, people will keep flooding to Lagos with the delusion that there are going to be jobs waiting for them on the streets. And that, for instance, hasn't happened over the years. Even the Lagos economy is not creating as much jobs as people expect it to. And it's not going to change because it's a policy problem at the center and at the state level.
Adio, because you're a politician, I like the fact that you've had to speak not like a politician at all. You've had to address the issues. But if perhaps you have the chance, how do you address these issues differently?
Oh, my good friend, I'm going to have a chance in 2027 because I'm going to win the Etiosa 2 constituency election. What we're going to do differently is a pragmatic approach to governance. And I give you an instance because I'm deeply worried, right? Because today as we speak, remember that a Supreme Court justice in India made a very unpleasant remarks about young people that led to a cockroach revolution now in India, where millions of young people are consistently protesting such that the education minister had to resign. In 2025 in Sri Lanka, because of lack of opportunities and the banning of social media, young people went on the streets demanding better, and it led to the ousting of the prime minister of that country. In 2024, the same thing happened in Bangladesh. Because of the lack of job opportunities, millions of young people flooded the streets and led to the resignation of the prime minister. So there is a wave of young people who can no longer deal with the lack of opportunities and the cost of living crisis at a global scale. And so you need politicians to be pragmatic to respond to the current challenges that young people face, which is the high cost of transportation, which is the high cost of housing, and which is the high cost of educating their children. On these three particular scores, the Lagos state government has spectacularly failed. The British Prime Minister came into office, and the first thing he did was to cap the price of bus transportation at £2. In Lagos, we raised the price of BRT by 15% in the middle of an energy crisis in the world. That is absurd. It means that you're not living in the reality of millions of people. The cost of property in Lagos continue to rise faster than income and wages can catch up to. So these are pragmatic approaches that we must invest in social and public housing. We must invest in cheap, affordable public transportation that can move people across the city so that they can access economic opportunities. We must intervene in microcredits to provide facility for young people to start micro businesses without having to run into debt, because microfinances are charging 60% on return of capital. These are the fundamentals that I'm going to focus with. These are the fundamentals that my party is going to focus with, and I believe that way we can begin the process of turning the corner, albeit gradually.
Well, thank you so much, Ayodele. We wish you the very best in your journey. We're building to that moment. We call it the Super Bowl of political leadership in Nigeria. January and February, we'll get to the polls, and all of the hot air will be tested on the field. But thank you for your insight on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. God bless you.